Welcome to the Lemonade Stand Stories podcast. Tune in every Thursday as we share inspirational stories from the world's greatest creators, entrepreneurs, and go-getters about how they've turned life's lemons into lemonade. And now, here's your host of Lemonade Stand Stories, Charan Prabhakar.
What is going on, guys? This is Charan Prabhakar with the Lemonade Stand Stories podcast. And today is going to be a very, very, very special day. A very special day indeed, because across from me sits a man who is a legend, who here's the thing. I had the privilege of knowing of his reputation well before I met him. And so when I finally did get the chance to say hi to him, I was terrified and I was fearful and I was so intimidated. But Rocco Devilliers sits in front of me, and I'm just gonna, before we even let Rocco speak at all, I have to keep on telling this story of how we first met, because years and years ago, this was actually 2008, I was invited to a screening of a movie called The Flyboys. Now, this is not the James Franco movie. This is a different movie that was produced locally, is what I was told. And I went to the theater and I watched it, and I was blown away. I was like, why have I never heard of this movie? What is happening to this movie? This was one of those movies that it was like the ultimate family adventure, little kids on bikes riding around being chased by crazy bullies, and then hopping on an airplane and then flying all over the place. And it's like an independent filmmaker made it, and I thought, this is insane, and this is way better than a lot of the cheesy Mormon movies I had watched till that point. And I thought it was amazing. And they're like, yeah, this is Rocco. Rocco Devilliers made this. And I'm like, who is this Rocco? How do I not know him? And then what's funny is the main character in this movie, his name is Riley McClendon, one of the main boys. A couple weeks later, I had booked a movie called Abandoned Mine. And Riley apparently was in that movie, but he's 18 now, and he was a little kid in that movie. So I'm like, wait a minute, I think I know you, but how do I know you? And then I'm like, wait, are you the Flyboys boy? And it was, so we had this whole thing, and then Riley starts going on and on about Rocco. Anyway, finally, we end up somehow meeting. I think it was at a Comic-Con or a Fan X or something. And it was one of those I think that's the guy. That's the guy. And so we made eye contact a couple of times. We're like, hey, hi, how's it going? And it was just so nerve-wracking and so dumb. But then really, I think what it was your brother, Jason Devilliers, who's also a dear friend of mine, invited me to come up to your house because you were having these movie nights. And I'm like, oh my gosh, Rocco. Yeah, of course I know Rocco. And so I'm all nervous. But now, Rocco and I and Rocco, we hang out I hang out at your house all the time now.
I'm proud to call you a dear friend.
Oh man, dude, it's the best though, dude. Because here's the thing, you guys, Rocco, your ability to gather people of like-mindedness in the film space. We always have movie nights at your house, have dinners at your house. It's so awesome. But yeah, thanks, man. Thank you so much for coming here and joining me on this crazy adventure, and it's gonna be awesome.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So we're gonna dive in though, because I love the Flyboys. That's the first movie I saw that you did, and I thought it was just so amazing. And then I watched other things that you had made, but there was this one thing that you had done called Pure Race back in the day, and you were doing your own stunts, and I'm like, who is this guy? Because you were diving away from moving cars that were about to hit you in 2 seconds, jumping off of 80-foot cliffs into water. It's just crazy. You were the director and you were doing your own stunts because none of the other actors would do it. It was insane. It was insane.
It's amazing what you'll do when you don't have a budget.
Yeah, no, it's great.
I'm making my movie one way or another. I got to get this shot.
I know. So, dude, how did you begin this whole journey to filmmaking?
It's funny because having raised some kids and lived some life, I feel very blessed that I knew what I wanted to do from a young age, because a lot of people don't get that gift. It takes people a while to figure out what they want to do. And for me, ever since I was a little kid, I wanted to be in film. I loved television. I grew up watching Star Trek on TV, and it just captured my imagination. And then when Star Wars came out in 1977, it was game over. I mean, that film truly cemented the power of cinema in my little 7-year-old brain. And just the visual imagery and the complexity of that film and the magic. I mean, it gave my very active imagination a whole universe to run around in, and like it did for so many of us. And, you know, I just, once I hit about 5th or 6th grade, some of the first home video cameras were starting to come out. And I would daydream about movies I wanted to make. I just had no means to do it, you know? So one of my buddies, Vinton Hoyk, who's now a very successful director of animation, does Warner Brothers shows and other things. His dad, you know, because we grew up on the Oregon coast, his dad got one of the first home video cameras. As soon as he got that thing, we made this little Star Trek movie for our class, and then I had the bug. At that point, I was like, I'm done. How do I get my hands on another video camera? So we moved to Twin Falls, Idaho, and this was sort of the big boom of the, you know, home video market, renting VHS tapes. And at the local video store, they rented video cameras. They rented video cameras for $20 a day. So I would save up my allowance and pre-plan all these little short films I wanted to make, and rent the camera for a day, get my friends together, make these little movies before we had to return the camera. My parents saw that I was like not going to quit. I was really passionate about it. So they helped me get my own video camera. And then that was a game changer. So it was just making little movies. And they got more and more elaborate. They got more and more polished. And I was just self-taught because this was pre-internet. So it was all, you know, trial and error.
Yeah.
You know? So that was kind of the beginning, you know, and I just started making little shorts and telling stories. I figured out how to tell stories, you know. So
well, the thing was, I love the fact that when you're making your movies, like you went for it. Like you really, really went for it, because I mean, I know you were a little bit older at the time, but when you did like the Flyboys, I remember watching a bit of that. I remember thinking like, because was I shot on actual 35 millimeter film? Yeah,
the Flyboys was shot on 35 millimeter film. So I'm glad, you know, before everything went digital, that I had an opportunity to do a true film.
No, that was amazing. And the thing was, like, there were car chases, there were airplane chases, you know, like nutty stuff. Like, it's like, this is insane. And you had like one of the Baldwin brothers in it, right?
Yeah, Stephen Baldwin.
Baldwin was in it. Tom Sizemore, like some big name actors. How did that movie come to pass?
You know, I made a little film called Pure Race when I was 21. I was sort of at that threshold where it's like, do I go to college? Do I go to film school? And I just, you know, after sort of examining what was happening at some of the local film programs at different colleges, you know, I saw some of the work that the first year students were doing. I'm like, I was doing that in junior high school, you know? Yeah. And so I just kind of really felt like for me, it was not a good use of my time. And so I thought, you know what, I'm just going to do a feature. I'm going to jump in, do a feature. I had saved up like $5,000. So I was able to get a camera and, you know, just kind of self-fund this little movie. And, you know, we came up with this very ambitious story. For me, I wanted to make a film about racism, you know, and this was back in the early 90s. And but I wanted to make an action adventure film. So basically the premise is, you know, two college guys, one white, one black, are kind of forced to ride share home from college. They're two strangers, but their car breaks down in a small town in Idaho, and they run into this neo-Nazi white supremacist group. And, you know, hijinks ensue, you know, so to speak, but it's this big action adventure with this racism sort of theme, because I wanted it to be about something that, you know, that was, you know, worthwhile and important. And so I went off and started making this little movie with my buddies. And, you know, it took me 4 years to make that movie. So I shot it, did all the lighting, did stunt work. I mean, everything. Yeah. And it was a very ambitious little movie for the budget. And, you know, that was my 4-year film school. So I had done that. And it really, you know, I put so much into that film, and then we got a distributor, and the distributor started selling it overseas, and it opened in a couple theaters. We actually made a couple film prints, and he did some deals. But this distributor, I learned my first lesson of, you know, Hollywood lesson, so to speak. And this distributor basically skipped town with all the money. We never got our money, you know. Yeah. it probably for that little, we ended up maybe spending $15,000 on that movie, and it probably made $450,000, $500,000. And this distributor literally stole the movie from us, you know, and
No
it
way.
was an incredible lesson. You know, it was a hard pill to swallow to see like 4 years of your blood, sweat, and tears, especially at that age. 4 years is a long time.
Yeah.
Just get taken from you, you know, but this is the world we live in. So that experience really kind of burned me out a little bit. And I started, you know, doing other things. Like I loved editing. I love post-production. And so I started editing other people's films, which was really nice because I didn't have the burden of directing. And so that was really kind of a nice little break from, you know, producing and directing. And so all of a sudden I found myself being asked to edit all these films. And after a couple of years of that, I could see the writing on the wall. I thought if I keep doing this, I'm going to blink and 10 years is going to go by and I will have not made another film. So that's when the Flyboys was born. So I thought, you know, I really want to make a kids film. I want to make a kids film, but I want to make the kind of kids film that Hollywood isn't making anymore. I want to make something that I would have loved as a 12-year-old, you know, and where there's real stakes. The kids are in mortal danger. It's real. And so I thought to myself, well, what's the best kids film ever made? And I had to say E.T.
Yeah, for sure.
Because E.T. was so honest and authentic, and the kids were so real, and they were, you know, real kids with real problems, but you had this fantastical element. And that movie is so beautiful and so honest, you know? And so for me, I thought, okay, well, that's the kind of film I need to make. And The Flyboys is a very personal film for me. I mean, there's a lot of things in there that really mean a lot to me. And I think as an artist, your films are really a reflection of who you are. And most, you know, so for The Flyboys, you know, I grew up with a grandfather who was an incredible pilot, and he owned dozens of airplanes. He was a crop duster by trade, little small town in Idaho. And I just have such fond memories of visiting my grandparents in Blackfoot, Idaho, and hanging out at that little airport and climbing in his airplanes with my cousins and making up adventures. And he had this old Twin Beach that had the engines removed. And then he had a really pristine one that flew, but we would climb in the old one and, you know, sit in the cockpit and pretend we're flying and all. Anyway, so that was sort of the germ of the idea for the story. I thought, okay, what if a couple of kids are horsing around at a little local airport and they love airplanes and they accidentally stow away aboard an airplane owned by the mafia and get caught up in this big adventure. And so that's, you know, so I came up with the story and worked on the screenplay with my brother Jason, and Richard Dutcher, my dear friend, came on board and did a pass on the screenplay and raised private equity and went off and shot the movie. And it was, you know, it took me 6 years to make that movie.
Wow.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, it's hard, right? Like when raising money is the challenge, of course.
Yeah.
So raising money is a challenge, and then like trying to get all those actors and stuff involved. Like, how did you get all those actors? Like Tom Sizemore is a big actor. Stephen Baldwin's a big actor.
Yeah. You know, we knew that we needed to get, even though our budget was pretty low, we ended up doing the whole film for $2 million. And
wow.
I mean, that probably wouldn't even cover the catering budget for a Marvel movie, you know, but at the time, and the fact that we were shooting on film, that was a big expense as well, because we wanted to have something that could potentially be shown in theaters. So really the strength of the script is what got us through. And I have, you know, I really owe Richard Dutcher a lot, because he came in and did a final polish on that script that really elevated it. And you know, so when we were casting the boys, thankfully, you know, when you're casting minors, you're not paying like Brad Pitt type, you know,
rates,
because very few minors can open a film with their name. I mean, maybe once every generation there's somebody like a Macaulay Culkin, or, you know, that comes along that's a big star. But so I told the casting director, you know, when she put the breakdown out, you know, in LA, I want to find the Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt of child actors. You know, I want two very charismatic kids that are physical, but that have great chemistry. And so we saw every top child actor in Hollywood that had done lots of big movies. And we landed on Riley McClendon and Jesse James. Fortunately, the script was so cool. Like if you're a kid, I knew that's like, I knew that with the story and what these kids would be required to do, that no kid would be able to resist wanting to be in this film. Yeah. So we had that going for it. At least it wasn't some like drama or something. It was a fun action adventure film that these two kids were going to carry. So after, and we had to cast it pretty quickly. So I told Jennifer Buster, the casting director, it's like, look, only bring me kids that have been in big films, because, if they've worked for Spielberg, I know that to get there, they went through like 5,000 kids. So just bring me the kids that have landed these big gigs, so that we're looking at, because we don't have time to go through 5,000 kids.
Right. Yeah.
So Jesse and Riley had done Pearl Harbor together.
Mm-hmm.
Jesse had a very successful film career at that point. He had been in As Good as It Gets with Jack Nicholson and Helen Hunt, and Blow with Johnny Depp. And he had been in a lot of films, Message in a Bottle with Costner and Robin Wright Penn. And anyway, so because these two kids had worked together on Pearl Harbor, they played the young Ben Affleck and Josh Hartnett at the beginning. They already knew each other, so they had some chemistry. So we just got really lucky. Timing's everything, because with child actors, especially when you're casting, that 12-year-old age, it's like right before they
start growing up.
Yes. And then, but they're old enough to, really get into trouble, but they're still cute kids.
Yeah.
There's just a short window. So we got really lucky with those two, because they're phenomenal actors.
Yeah.
And they still are. And
it's interesting, because I don't know Jesse, but I have worked with Riley, right? And I'm going to send this to Riley afterwards as well. But Riley and I have become like very close friends. And I remember when we did the Abandoned Mine movie together, just how giving he was as an actor. Like he carried that film. It's really about 5 kids, but I would say he was the one that really carried the film. And he was just a giving actor. And it's always nice when you're working with someone that's just a very giving person, not just as an actor, but as a human being. And Riley's just like so kind and so warm. And
he's a good dude.
Yeah, he's a very, very good dude. And so it was a lot of fun working with him.
Yeah.
So
you can always tell the kids that have been raised right.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you meet child actors and they're, these little hooligans,
yes.
and you're not surprised when some of them get in trouble, later in life. But it's interesting, because I worked with Austin O'Brien on a film in the 90s, and he had done The Last Action Hero with Arnold Schwarzenegger, and he had done My Girl 2, and he had a TV series, but his parents were so solid, and just I saw how they raised him and his brother and sister, who also were in the film industry, and they were just so solid, and it's a testament to the parents. Yeah.
So it's very interesting, and so we could talk about child actors all day long, because like that was such a big thing. But like, how many days was your shoot for that movie?
It was spread out a little bit. We shot. In fact, it's funny because it's been 20 years. Wow. We started shooting September 30th, 2002, and I could still tell you what we shot every single day.
Oh my gosh,
that schedule is etched into my mind. But we shot for a couple of months and then took a hiatus and focused on the stunts. We did the skydiving stuff, which was all practical. We had a skydiving team, some of which had worked on James Bond films and Point Break, and we actually set a world record for most concealed parachute jumps in a movie, because these parachutes had to be specially built. And there's very few people in the world qualified to do that. So we were really lucky to have that team. And then we did the highway landing of the Twin Beach, where the 2 boys are forced to land this twin engine airplane on a highway full of cars. We had to shoot that. So we sort of did our second unit stuff, our car chase stuff. I've always found that, when you've got budget constraints and you've got action, you can do a lot with second unit. So if the actors aren't in a shot, save that stuff for later and come back with like a 5-man crew and get your second unit stuff. So that whole car chase, most of that was second unit. We did have doubles for the kids who were, bike BMX bike champions, you know, that could do amazing things on bikes. And we were able to find, you know, some lookalikes. And then we came back and shot Stephen Baldwin for a week, and then took another hiatus because we originally had Alec Baldwin to play, you know, the older brother. There's a parallel story going on. There's the story of the two boys who become fast friends and go on this adventure. But there's also, for me, when I made the film, one of the fallacies of kids' films is you always have these really goofy, cardboard cutout, one-dimensional bad guy characters, right? That are kind of slap. And that's fine for that kind of movie. But for this, I really wanted the bad guys to be real people that you actually, you know, might even start. Yeah, exactly. And so there's a parallel story going on about these two brothers. You know, one of them is, you know, a mob boss, and the other one is the younger brother who just never quite measures up. And so there's a parallel story going on there. Really, at the end of the day, one of the themes is brothers, you know. So for those roles, I thought, okay, we'll get our names in those roles because we could probably shoot them out, you know, in a week or two. And so we had cast Stephen. We went out to Alec Baldwin. I was so excited to work with Alec Baldwin as well. And Stephen is such an intense actor. He's so good. And he's such a great guy and just great to work with. I thought wouldn't it be cool if we had real brothers playing brothers on screen? So that idea kind of went out the window. Alec had just done Cat in the Hat, and you know, he said yes for about 2 days and then said, you know, I just can't do another one of these, you know? And so fine, you know, the universe, it wasn't meant to be. Wasn't meant to be. So we stumbled onto Tom Sizemore, and wow, that guy is an incredible actor. Tom brings this element of danger, you know, because the character of Angelo, you've got to buy off on who this guy is in just a few scenes. And Tom just brings this element of danger to, you know, everything he does. Because Tom is an incredible actor, but, you know, Tom grew up in inner city Detroit, and you know, he had a rough upbringing, you know, and he's a tough guy, you know, and so working with Tom was so perfect for that. What he brings to that role, the layers. Because yes, he's dangerous, but you love the guy and the way he, like, you know, connects with the kids, and there's so much going on. And then the stuff with the brother, he brought such a layered performance. So we came back and shot Tom, you know, for a week. So it was spread out a little bit. Sure. And that's the long answer to your question. But, you know, again, it's, you know, it was nice to have the downtime so we could regroup. Find the right guy to play Angelo, and also cut scenes together and get pickups, and, you know.
I mean, I'm telling you, independent filmmaking is no joke, man. If you want to, like, really make a film, it's tough stuff. And the Flyboys, it's a spectacle. It was like, when I remember watching it and just being so blown away and thinking, wow, I cannot believe that such talent was here in Utah all along. So that's awesome.
Thank you. Thanks. I got lucky. We had a great crew. We had a great team. We had great actors, you know. Making a film, it's kind of like a house of cards, you know. Really, like, 1 week card can, like, bring the whole thing down. And it's so stressful because making a film is physically exhausting. It's emotionally exhausting, mentally exhausting. And as a filmmaker, for me, the biggest pressure is not messing up my movie, because you go to set every day and you're like, okay, we're a week in. So far, I've gotten everything and things are flowing really well, but I could still screw it all up today. And so by the time you're a month in, you're like, I can still screw this up today. And you just got to find that flow. And I always like to create a real family synergy on the set, because energetically, the energy behind a film does sort of, you know, leap out of the screen sometimes. I mean, very troubled productions, you know, can lend themselves to, you know, sort of a disastrous end product sometimes, but you can almost feel the energy of, so if a lot of love and passion goes into a project, it comes out on the screen.
That's awesome.
It does. It comes out on the screen. So
I've always believed that. I've always felt like the energy of a set can, like, really make or break the actual production. I've made my own movies where I'm like, okay, I feel like just make sure that everyone's feeling positive, everyone's feeling loved, and then it turns out into a more positive experience.
Yeah, it's a real fine line. I've actually heard, Blade Runner is such a classic, but it was a troubled production, a very troubled production, a very tough shoot. And I remember reading a quote from the producer where he said, I've never seen a truly great film with just a smooth sailing production, you know, because when you have a filmmaker who's pushing and pushing and pushing, but it's finding that balance, it's being respectful to your crew, not beating up your crew too badly, and, finding that synergy. But at the end of the day, on the Flyboys, we were pushing and we were working hard and we were pushing the boundaries. And again, I think if you're too comfortable, your film sort of can get a little stagnant, and mediocrity sometimes can be creative. So it is that fine line, but you're absolutely right about the energy of creating this positive, it's like, okay, we're here to have fun and tell this story, but we're
also here to work.
I
remember there was a night we were shooting this movie, Alien Country, and Boston, our director, was like saying all the things that we're going to be doing in one night. He was like saying, we're going to be doing this shot, and then we're doing that shot, and then we have to do this shot. And we're like all looking at each other. We're like, oh boy,
it's gonna be a long night.
It's going to be a long night. And it was like, we were like beating, we were up all night shooting. And at the very last moment, the last shot, the sun started coming up, like, oh, and we're done. We are done,
Nice.
So it's always just kind of fun to do stuff like that.
Especially if you've got a group and they're really passionate about it and they want, you know what I mean? Because it's funny, Jim Moore, my cinematographer, very talented cinematographer. I've been working with him for over 20 years. And he has this thing where, if you get one person on the crew with a really crummy attitude, it's like a cancer and it spreads. Yeah. And so really handpicking your people and the team is super important, because you've got to have that positive, energetic flow.
And I think and that can be true for everything in life, honestly, right? Mm-hmm. Because if you have the weak link, and I'm not saying weak link as in like, oh, they can't carry it, but it's more of a weak link in attitude almost, or a weak link in like, just like, the constant complainer. Because like, one of the things about a film set is like, it is grueling work. It can be very grueling. It can be very tough. And you're on for hours on end all day long, and then you have to go to bed, and then, okay, the call sheet's coming out in the morning, early morning. We're going to be bright up and early up and doing this again. And it can really kind of wear on you. But I remember like some of the movies that I've done, by the time we're done, it's like we're weeping because we don't want to say goodbye to each other, because we were like an army almost. We like went and did this amazingly beautiful thing together. We've had all these amazing memories. Yeah. And that to me was one of the reasons why I ever got to be a filmmaker to begin with. I just saw the power of making projects with your friends and the memories that you were creating along the way. And it's funny, I have a movie that I made back in 2011, 2012, super low budget. And same thing, we got all of our money stolen from us, I'm like, well, that was terrible. But yet I can look and be like, man, the memories, incredible. I loved them, and I can't wait to make more with some friends of mine, so it's always a good thing. So.
It's sort of, it's how life goes, you set out on this path and it's never quite the path you think it's going to be. Mm-hmm. And, the toughest times end up being some of the best memories, because it does define you and mold you, and you learn the most from those tough times. And filmmaking it's not an easy thing. It's not for the faint of heart. And it's that passion and love for the medium that gets you through, whether you're in front of the camera or behind the camera.
Absolutely. I love that. I love how you said that, because I almost think that goals are just to give you direction sometimes. But that's all they are, because prepare for like pivots and twists.
It's constant
all
pivoting
the time,
And the people that can really pivot, they make the best filmmakers, because it is your analogy of an army and going to war, so to speak. You really, it's very true. You go out there with a plan. You have this large group of people, all this equipment, all this money being spent, all these logistics, and you get out there and the explosions start going off and you're on the battlefield and you have to pivot because you have everything working against you. You've got weather, you've got equipment. Any little thing can like bring that production to a halt, and you have to keep it going because you're spending so much money every moment. So that's one of the reasons I love post-production, because the movie's in the can, so to speak. You've, and it's just you and the footage, and barring the power going out, you're okay, you're safe, you're gonna, but when you're out in the elements with all those variables, it's very stressful. It's a lot of work.
It's crazy, man. It's crazy. But speaking of pivoting, I wanted to talk because there was a time though when we were at your house, you started showing me footage of this documentary you were doing called Gladiators of Steel. And I remember watching it and I'm like, what is this craziness? And it's just about just guys just beating up each other in their cars, like just destroying each other. And then the next thing I know, you're saying to me, you're like, oh yeah, we have a whole new streaming platform we're launching called Wheelhouse. And we're going to be creating documentaries and movies and stuff about motorsports. And I'm like, what? And it's like such a different thing than what you were saying before. So how did this come to be?
Great question. Again, it's like you just never know. Once you get on the road, you never know where it's going to lead you. But you got to be willing to like get on the road, right?
Yeah.
I think so many people just, they'd rather kind of stay home and play it safe. But the magic of this whole experience called life is like, I'm just gonna get out there and see what happens. I'm gonna tell you one story real quick.
Please.
So this is a good example of this. So when I was 21 years old, making my first movie, Pure Race, I had shot the film. It took me 2 years to shoot it, and I had met a guy in North Carolina, Lewis Asbury, who's a dear friend and mentor. In fact, I learned more about life and art and cinema and the technical side and color from this guy at a young age. And it's really, having mentors in our life is an important thing. And Lewis was an incredible influence for me. Anyway, so he had a production studio in North Carolina. So I thought, okay, well, we'd worked out a deal where I could go edit my film at his studio. So I packed everything in my car that I owned, basically.
Yeah.
I had these 2 editing decks. I had 2 years worth of footage. I had all this stuff, and I'm driving to North Carolina. Second day on the road, I'm going through Missouri, and I'm trying to push through to get through to St. Louis so I can stay the night in St. Louis. And there, there's this big long line of semi trucks and this big stretch of road. I'm passing all these trucks. I'm flying down this hill, and it's probably 10 o'clock at night, and I see police lights in my rearview mirror. I'm like, oh boy, okay, how fast was I going? I don't even know. Pull over, the officer walks up, and he's like, do you have any idea how fast you were going? I'm like, I really don't, officer. I was trying to pass. And he's like, you were going 103 miles an hour.
Okay.
And he's like, all right, just stay here for a minute. And then he comes back. He's like, do you know that your driver's license has been revoked? And no.
Yeah.
And he's like, all right, come back with me. So I go back. I don't even know where I am. It's like, late at night on some highway in Missouri on the freeway. And and so he has me sit in the squad car with him. And he's like, all right, well, I just got, I'm going to read you your rights, And I was like, wait, what?
Yeah.
And he's like, you don't have any knives or anything on you. He kind of pats my pockets, that was like, I'm like, wow, I'm being arrested. And I got arrested. And this guy basically takes me to the station. I'm like, wait, so is my car just going to stay on the freeway? I have like 2 years worth of work sitting in that car. And he's like, don't worry, I'll call a tow truck. And I'm like, can you please have them store my car inside somewhere where it doesn't get broken into? And he's like, all right, so I go down to the police station. It was the most surreal thing ever. And I remember at first being really sort of nervous about it, but it's like all of a sudden I just felt this calm. I felt this like calmness about just go with this. Everything's going to work out okay. And I just had a calm, kind of peaceful feeling. And, I'm just kind of this dorky kid from Utah, and he could tell I wasn't a criminal, So I go to the station, they take my mugshot, they fingerprint me, and he's like, all right, well, your bail is $450. And I'm like, what's bail? And he explained it to me. And I said, okay, well, do you take Visa? He's like, no. I'm like, well, are there any ATMs around here? He's like, no. So I was like, who carries that kind of cash around, right?
Yeah.
So he's like, well, you'll have to call a bail bondsman, So I'm like, what's that? And he explained that to me and then handed me this list. He's like, we're not allowed to recommend anybody, but here's a list of bail bondsmen in the area. I look at like 30 names on this list. I randomly pick one name in the middle, Lyle Moore. Call up. This young guy answers the phone. Hi, is this Lyle Moore? He's like, yeah. Oh, you're looking for my dad. He's on a walk with my mom, but I'll page him. And a few minutes later, Lyle Moore Sr. calls me and he's like, yeah, can I help you? I tell him what's going on. And Lyle told me later, Lyle Sr., the bail bondsman, which was one of his many businesses, he said, I never touch people from out of state because I'll never see them again. I pay their, so he came down as a courtesy. He sat down, started talking to me, asking me, where I'm from, what I'm doing, where I'm going, just everything about me, right? So when I start talking about film, well, I made this movie and I'm going to edit it. And he became really interested in this whole filmmaking thing and started quizzing me on like the film industry and all that. And after about 15 minutes, I'm like, what's this guy doing? He's like, it's all film industry. And finally he said, my son is a very talented musician and he's always wanted to score a film. And I think you two should meet. So he bails me out. He's like, where are you staying tonight? I'm like, well, I was going to go to St. Louis. He's like, no, come stay at our house.
No way, dude.
He like literally like feeds me, gets my car, takes me home with him, wakes his son up because it's like midnight at that point, introduces me to Lyle Moore, and we end up becoming like really tight friends.
No way.
Lyle ends up investing in Pure Race and help keeping it going. And then Lyle Moore Jr. ends up doing the score, all the sound. I end up going to Boston where he's going to Berklee College of Music. And we, for like 6 months, work on the movie together. And then I end up, meeting the mother of my children, in Boston. And, it's like this chain reaction. So, when you're going to get on the road of life and you're going to try something that maybe is a little out of your comfort zone, I'm going to go to this city or I'm going to go try this. You just never know who you're going to run into. And the irony is when I came back 2 weeks later for my court date, I was able to prove that my license was valid and it was like a computer glitch. So I would have never been arrested.
No way.
And Lyle Moore Sr. ended up being one of the primary investors in the Flyboys too. So again, this chain reaction, I wouldn't have my kids, the kids I have. And
if you didn't get arrested in Missouri.
All because of that. Pulled over for speeding.
Wow, dude. Yeah. I have never heard of that story before. That's amazing. And it's beautiful, right? It's just like, because when you look back and you're like, whoa, because if this hadn't happened, this wouldn't have happened, which that wouldn't have happened, Yeah. And I've had those things happen too, but like, wow, that was just incredible. Like the synchronicities that happened all along the way to make it so that you've had what you have right now. That's amazing.
So it's a real testament to, okay, this bad thing is happening to me. What I'm perceiving is bad, and woe is me. And this is terrible. Why me? But it's like, if you can sort of shift the way you deal with life and look at things, it's all a gift. It's all a gift. Life pays the biggest dividends sometimes from the most challenging stuff,
It really does.
So doing films, the Flyboys made the rounds in Hollywood. I had lots of offers to direct big studio films, and it was an exciting time. I was meeting people that I regarded as my heroes and idols, and it was just an amazingly exciting time. I was offered these big films, and it got to a point where I was at this crossroads, and I remember this voice in my head saying, if you go down this path, you will never know your kids.
Oh, wow.
And it just didn't feel right. And I just sort of walked away, and ended up, raising my kids and focusing on my kids. And those have been the best years of my life. And, not moving to LA and sort of working full time as a director, it was because ever since I was young, that's what I knew I wanted to do, but it wasn't my path at that time, and so I feel like I definitely made the right decision. I mean, focusing on my kids. I'm very proud of my kids. I mean, the best years of my life has been raising my kids. So, so in answer to your question about Gladiators of Steel, there was a real pivot because, you know, for years I took on post-production and things that I could, you know, do mostly from home, keep me close to home, manage from home. And I would do these feature films and hire big VFX teams and hire all the post and supervise it all and sort of produce all the post-production. And because it was really important to me to be able to take my kids to school every day and be there to pick them up every day and be really hands-on. And so those were beautiful, beautiful years, you know? So my youngest son was starting his senior year of high school. And I thought, okay, I don't want to miss a minute of this because this whole crazy ride of being a parent, this phase is almost over, you know? And so this project kind of fell into my lap, this demolition derby thing. And, I was able to put a project together, which was a documentary about demolition derby. And I didn't really know much about demolition derby. I'd never really even been to a demolition derby before. But once I saw what really goes into this very misunderstood sport, what happens behind the scenes, like the engineering and what these drivers do to basically build these cars to go into an arena and just demolish the hell out of them, you know? But they're chasing that rush, you know, that 8 to 15 minute adrenaline experience of being in an arena and driving that car. And, you know, it's like the ancient Roman gladiatorial games in a way, you know, last car standing wins, but it's a fascinating sport and very misunderstood. And so I thought, wow, this would actually make a really interesting documentary. And so it was the perfect project to kind of sink my teeth into while my youngest son was finishing his last year of high school. And so that's where it started. And then we finished it, you know, worked through the pandemic, and I was really proud of it because it's not like a reality TV show where things are staged and things are cheesy and over the top. This is a real authentic deep dive into the sport. And so we got to the point where we were looking for potential distribution and releasing this. And, you know, again, I've had so many bad experiences with distributors, you know, even with the Flyboys and, you know, projects. The system is designed so the filmmaker
does not
gets
make his money.
Hosed.
Yes.
You know, that's how the system is designed. It's a very brutal, unethical business. And I thought, you know, once we started showing it around, we got, you know, people really liked it. But this is a very middle America sort of sport, right? It's motorsports. And I don't think Hollywood really understands this crowd at all, you know, because frankly, as Larry the Cable Guy once said, Hollywood doesn't understand anything much outside of LA and New York. They just don't. And I loved the fact that I could give this group a voice in this series because these people are really smart. They have things to say. And, you know, frankly, that crowd is, you know,
underserved.
And they're mostly kind of not given a voice on other platforms. So that was an important element for me. And as we kind of did the rounds, you know, it's not uncommon to see a Trump flag at one of these derbies, you know, it's like, it's an examination of a culture and I wanted it to be authentic, but you know, I was getting comments like, well, you're going to have to remove that Trump flag and you can't have that guy say this because that might offend somebody. Someone might be triggered. And I just, you know, I was just sort of like, all right, that's it. We're not doing the rounds anymore. We're going to put this out ourselves. And so that's when we decided, you know what, let's create our own platform because motorsports is an interesting niche. It's got a very passionate following. Car lovers, they are very passionate about cars, you know,
they are.
And motorsports, they are really passionate about it. So if we can give them really well-produced cinematic quality content, unlike, you know, some of the cheesier fare out there, you know, there's just a lot of stuff that's more reality TV based. It's just kind of cheap, you know, and
it doesn't look that cinematic quality, right?
So that's what we wanted to do is create something really top-notch, cinematic, and give this crowd something that, you know, like George Lucas said when he started making Star Wars toys, is like kids didn't realize how badly they wanted these toys until I put them in front of them, you know. And for this crowd. This is our gift to motorsports fans. And so the fact that we could create a platform, Wheelhouse Motorsports, and release this content and take it directly to the consumer, again, we don't have to deal with crooked distributors and all these middlemen taking their piece, because
you're the distributor.
Yeah, we're the distributor. So we're focusing on our niche and building our audience, and we're releasing the show December 21st.
Amazing.
And it'll be a really fun experiment.
Yeah.
It'll be fun to put something like this, in front of the motorsports fan base.
Yeah. So. That's awesome, man. Well, I'm super excited for it because, I mean, in a sense, I feel like I've been kind of seeing this project kind of come to fruition from when you made it to now it being out in Wheelhouse. I remember coming out to the premiere for it and just being like, okay, this is going to be really fun. It's going to be a very interesting thing to see how it all goes down. But I'm really stoked for that. That's awesome, man. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's been a lot of work, I'll say this about doing a documentary. Now, this is a 6-part limited series, and it is the deep dive into the sport, but I'm very proud of the fact that it's so authentic, and it really does emotionally draw you in. There's some very human stories here, but doing a documentary was brutal. It was my first time doing a docu-series or documentary, and because when you're doing a narrative feature, you have that script, because when you're in the heat of battle and you're out there, you're shooting on location, your script is your safety net. It's like, okay, well, as crazy as things are right now, I have these 5 pages to get today, and I'm clinging to, onto this for dear life. With a documentary, we would show up at some of these events with 12 cameras and just hope something interesting happened. I mean, it was like, okay, here we go. Let's see what happens. And it was nerve-wracking because you're spending all that money.
Yeah. So you basically are just shooting as much as you can and being please, for the love, let me get something that could be worth telling the story.
Yeah. Unfortunately, all kinds of great things manifested themselves. And then when you're in the edit room, that was really challenging because, again, you don't have a script. You have all this footage, and you've got to figure out a way to craft a narrative and sort of create a flow for telling this story. And it was like being in the ocean without a life raft. I mean, that's what it felt like as a filmmaker. So that was an interesting experience. And sometimes, it was brutal. There were times, that were so tough where I just, was sort of like at the end of my rope because I'm carrying this thing and but again, if you're not challenging yourself, you'll never know what you're really made of. Right. I mean, so it was a really interesting experience, but I'm very proud of it. It was a real sort of step in a different direction for me, but I think people will really enjoy it. And, there's a girl named Hannah Shelley who started derbying when she was 17. And here's this, 100 pound, girl getting in these big derby cars, competing with these seasoned male drivers.
Wow.
It's fascinating. And she's so inspiring. I think she'll inspire not only a lot of young women, but I think parents are going to be really inspired by this relationship she has with her dad and the fact that they do this thing together. They're out there building something with their hands and getting out there and they have such a bond. It's really special. And what happens to her when she does the big derby in California, I think people are going to be talking about for years.
That's awesome.
It's a great story, but I think if you're a derby fan or a motorsports fan, I think they'll love every aspect of this, but it really does, it's accessible to a wide audience. I think anyone who doesn't even, like for me, I didn't care about Demolition Derby. I didn't even know what it was. It was just not my speed.
Yeah.
But I was able to when I really had a chance to look at it, it was so fascinating, but I think it's definitely something that anybody can watch and really feel like they walked away being educated and inspired.
Oh, I love that, man. It's so awesome. Are you going to put other content on that's not documentary style, on the platform?
I think we will.
Features and maybe, but still surround around motorsports. Yeah. But
I think we will. I think we're going to do a couple more shows. We're going to continue to build up the content, but I think we've already got an idea for a feature film that's motorsports related that's sort of like the Footloose of motorsports,
Oh,
where
man,
it's like
I love it.
takes place in the 80s, small town,
Yeah.
classic like film, but like the Rocky of, like motorsports.
Oh man, that sounds awesome.
So we're going to work on that and do some more shows. But the goal is to build up enough content on that platform to have it be subscription based.
Yeah. That sounds awesome.
Because right now it's just sort of a pay-per-view thing, and you can get on there and it's like, okay, I'll watch this, and the rentals for like 60 days. And once you start an episode, you can binge watch it all at once. You can take your time, but once you start an episode, that rental expires in 48 hours, kind of like any other platform.
Yeah, sure.
But in addition to the 6 episodes, there's a lot of bonus content you get as well. So I think motorsports fans, they're
gonna love it, man.
They'll be pleased. They'll have a lot of stuff to watch.
That's awesome, man. I'm super stoked for you. This is gonna be so amazing to see how it all unravels. So changing topics a little bit, one of the things that we love to do in the Lemonade Stand Stories podcast is talk about people's lemonade stand stories. So to get to a lemonade experience, you first have to be dealt with lemons. Now, we've already talked about like getting pulled over and all these things that led to like these amazing things, but was there ever a moment in your life when you're like, wow, I don't know how I'm going to ever recover from this one? Like, this one was a freaking big blow.
Absolutely. I think after I made my first feature, and getting ripped off and never really having a payoff, and just, wow, do I want to keep doing this? And then I went through the same thing with the Flyboys. We got our butts handed to us on that film in a lot of ways. There was a period where I really was struggling and thought, you know what, I've been working my tail off in this industry, and I've never had, a real payoff. And what am I doing this for? It's like, is it worth? I don't even think this is worth it. And I really, for about a week, was in this mode of, it was a little bit scary. It's like, maybe I'm doing the wrong thing here. Is this even worth it? Yeah. And then I happened to stop by the Star Trek convention in Las Vegas. Okay. It was a random spur of the moment thing. A couple of my buddies were down there. It's like, let's just go to this thing. This will be fun, right? Yeah. And so we go to the Star Trek convention. We're all hanging out, and I walked by this booth. Lightspeed Fine Art is the company, if I remember right, but they have like art and autographs and different things. And I walked by and I saw this photo that was framed. It was blown up, and it was a 35 millimeter photo taken by Gary Kurtz, George Lucas's producing partner on Star Wars. And this photo was taken in 1976 when they were out in the deserts of Tunisia filming this iconic scene with Luke and Obi-Wan Kenobi and the Jawa Sandcrawler. And he just kind of stepped back and took a photo where you could see the whole crew. You could see filmmakers there on location in the dirt, making a movie with their bare hands. And it happened to be my favorite movie. And I walked by, and there was something about that photo that just called to me and reminded me why I love making films. And that was a game changer for me. So I immediately asked the person, it's like, how many of these do you have left? He's like, oh, that's the last one. They only printed 60. It's like a limited edition. It's for charity. It's $500. It's right off of Gary Kurtz's personal film negative. And it's signed by the whole camera crew, some of the cast, and by Gary Kurtz. And I had to have it. And I was broke at the time. So I put it on layaway. 6 months later, had it, and it hangs in my home. And it's a constant reminder why I do what I do.
Wow. And see, that's a beautiful thing, right? Because they captured a memory, right?
Yeah.
And in that memory, there was a lot of life. And in that memory, you got to see there was so much more than the money, right? There was so much more than like the fame. It was these guys together creating this beautiful piece of art so that the whole world could enjoy it. Yeah. I had to have like similar thoughts, like interactions with myself, because we had spent so much time making this movie, right? In 2011, 2012, 17-hour days, and I'm the lead actor. I remember there was one day, it was a 17 or 18-hour day, and I was in every single shot of that. Like it was
That's a lot of
it's
work.
brutal, man. It's
It
just
is
brutal.
brutal.
And the thing is my character is a very I played an alpha male in this movie. It's a comedy for sure, because it's like, how in the world could Sharon ever be an alpha male? In this movie, I was an alpha male, and it was.
Hey, you pull it off. Come on.
I pulled it
Every
off.
time
I
you
pulled it
walk in my door
I know.
for movie night, you pull that off.
Do I? Well,
Yes.
trust me. This is a very intense alpha male, but it's very comedic. But every scene, I had to like just have so much energy going for it for 17 hours. And then I would sleep for maybe 4 or 5 hours and then be back. And then we finished this movie, and then we watched the movie and we hated the third act. We're like, this is terrible. Like the first time we actually filmed it, we couldn't even finish the third act. That's the sucky part. We just could not finish it because we were so exhausted. Like my director had a panic attack. It was insane. So we're like, all right, let's go back to California. Let's regroup. Let's sleep a little bit. And so we rewrote this third act, and we came back to Utah and we filmed it. And we're like, okay, great. And then we edited the movie, and then we're like, this third act is terrible. this is a terrible third act. We can't do it. So then I remember we're like, all right, we've got to we got to do this again. We have to make it something that we're proud of. So we rewrite the third act we're gonna do it the third time. And we had like 1 week to shoot like 15 pages or 16 pages of action. We're like, all right, this is going to be an intense, brutal week, but we're going to make it happen. Drive back to Utah to make this thing. And turns out that my manager, before we drive out, she says, hey, Sharon, you are requested for a callback for this audition that you went out on. And I'm like, oh, for the love, when is it? They're like, oh, it's on Monday. You have to do the callback. I'm like, I'm supposed to be in Utah. I need to be filming. She's like, you have to do the callback. It's a commercial. It's a national commercial. Just do the callback. I'm like, all right, okay. So I had my buddy borrow my car. I'm like, all right, just take my car. Monday's a prep day anyway. Just drive out there. I'm going to do the callback. I'm going to fly to Utah and we're going to film. Do the callback, fly to Utah. And I get to Utah like around 12 or 1 in the morning, and 6 a.m. I'm shooting. And so I'm already like jet lagged, but I'm like, okay, energy. We're going to shoot this. And then around 11 a.m., my manager calls me again and says, Sharon, you booked the commercial. And I'm like, of course I did. But when are they shooting? They're shooting in weeks, right? They're like, no, they're shooting on Thursday. I'm like, dude, I'm supposed to be in Utah. Like, I'm the main actor of this movie. I have to film. She's like, Sharon, this is a national commercial. You have to be back. So I grab all my team. I'm like, okay, guys, this is crazy. But we have to, we got to regroup. We got to do something because I have to film this commercial on Thursday. So right then and there, we'd reschedule everything so that I can be in all the scenes that I need to be in and then go. So we shoot for 26 hours straight, okay? 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. the next day. The rest of the team collapses. I rush off to the airport. And then while I'm at the airport, it's one of those crazy moments where I'm like, I see another Indian guy standing to board the plane behind me. And I turn and I look, it's M. Night Shyamalan. I'm like, what? How's M. Night Shyamalan behind me? He's the director of Sixth Sense and Signs and all those movies. But
that's amazing.
Anyway, so we talked. I went to LA, did the commercial, flew back to Utah, did more of the movie. And it was an amazing experience. It was so exhausting. I was so tired. We finished the film, and then the whole thing got stolen from us. Like the whole thing got stolen from us. We didn't make a single dollar. And it wasn't even the distributor. It was like someone that they were working with that stole everything. And they apologized that we made nothing as well. I think we may have netted $1,000 of all this work. And it was so discouraging. And then I looked at our photos. And then I looked at the behind the scenes. And I started seeing all these memories of people laughing and having such a good time. And these things, these little subtle things that never made it on the film, but these things that where people suddenly were hugging each other and cheering and clapping, good job guys, you got this shot. And I'm like, oh my gosh, in that short amount of time, I made a lifetime of memories that I will never forget. And yes, I did not make a single dollar from that film. In fact, I spent money on that film, I spent my own money, didn't make anything back. But the memories I made were utterly priceless, And the truth is one of the actors of our film, who was a producer of another film of mine, took his life. He passed away. But now I can go back and watch that film and remember all the positive experiences I had with him, right? And so when you talk about that photo that you saw, that was like, that's why I do what I do. I look at the behind the scenes and think, yeah, that's why I do what I did. And yeah, I did not make money at all on the film, but man, did I make memories. And I cannot wait to share those memories with my friends over and over. And then another instance was while I was filming that movie, I invited a friend of mine to come on set. And this is a friend of mine from high school. Like, we used to goof around all the time. He came to a set and watched me work. And I had known he was like very successful. Like, he had billboards up with him. Like, he sold like this mortgage company, all this stuff. He was doing really good. And we were talking, and he was like, dude, it's so awesome. It's so awesome to see you doing your thing. I'm like, yeah, but man, look at you. Like, you're married, you got kids, you know, you got all this money, all this stuff. And he like looked at me, and he like looked down, and he looked sad all of a sudden. And he's like, yeah, but you're living your dreams. And I'll never forget that moment.
Wow.
I'll never forget that moment, because in that instant I realized, oh, I was the one that was living very fulfilled. And I could tell like he wasn't. He was trying to find other ways to make himself feel fulfilled, but he wasn't feeling fulfilled. And I'm like, so what is the worth of life, right? Like, what is the value of life? Like, am I truly living every single day, or am I not? And I realized at that moment, if I'm not living every single day, I don't care about the money and stuff. I mean, of course you want money to pay the bills and everything, but if I'm not living every single day, I will regret it. And so I always go back to that and think, I'm so glad I made that movie, you know?
Yeah.
And I'm so glad. And I'm so glad for what you're doing, because you are creating these memories. And that's one of the reasons why I love coming over to your house, because it's like some of the most goofiest things. We're like taking photo booths and you know, taking all these photos in this photo booth. And you go out of your way to, like, I mean, the last example was amazing. We watched this movie Poltergeist. And I remember telling you, I'm like, dude,
40th anniversary.
And I'm like, dude, I don't know if I'm going to make it through this movie, because it was the most scary movie I'd ever seen as a kid. And I'm like, there's just no way. But we made it through, and it wasn't bad at all as an adult, thankfully. But I remember like taking photos, and like there was this awesome TV there. And then I was told that you had driven to Oregon or someplace like that to go pick up this TV just so you could have it at this photo booth, because that was the only place you could find this TV, right?
It was the original model.
It was the original model.
1980, the exact model TV they used in the film.
And I remember thinking, like, that's why I love hanging with you and making these memories, because you will go out of your way so that we can make these awesome memories. And it was so great.
You know, it was really interesting for me, and why I started, gathering friends and colleagues together and creating these experiences is while I was making the Flyboys. You know, it took me 6 years. I was so ultra focused on that movie, and I had to be. It was just an incredible ride. And when it was over, it was like this Rumpelstiltskin moment where I realized 6 years have just gone by, and wow, everything around me has changed, and I was unaware of it. I had neglected friendships and family, and it was then that I decided, never again am I going to do that. And so, you know, that's when I started doing, these movie night parties and just inviting everybody. And there's so much love in the room. Everyone shows up, and there's so much positive energy and love and fun. And it's like watching a great piece of cinema in the theater room in 4K and watching it together with a big group, having a nice dinner together, and then doing some themed photo booths. So we have these fun photos as the memory. You know, it's been a really beautiful thing. And, I love it. No,
it's so awesome, man. It's so awesome. So what is the thing that brings you the most amount of joy right now?
Oh, my kids. I mean, my kids. I love what I do, even though it comes with a price sometimes, and I guess maybe that's what makes it so great is it's not easy, and, there were some really lean times. I mean, there's, it's feast or famine in this business. And there were times where I was like, how am I going to put food on the table? It was like living month to month, but I was living life on my own terms, and I was doing what I wanted. And you know what, frankly, if I had gone down that path of directing those studio films, and if I told you which films I turned down, you'd probably hit me on the head and tell me I was nuts, because I'd be a very wealthy man right now. But going down this other path, where it was just an adventure every month. Okay, how am I going to pay the bills? How am I going to do this? And figuring things out, and sort of getting to a point where I could sort of redefine my focus and then find a comfortable space. But that was the adventure,
Yeah.
That was the adventure. That was the best path for me. That was the path where I was learning the most,
It's
because
amazing, man.
because if I had success early on and financial success and everything else, I would probably be a very unhappy man today. But I was able to sort of live this adventure, and it was always a challenge, and I'm still living it, and
Yeah.
I'm just grateful. I'm really residing in gratitude,
Dude, I love that. Residing in gratitude. That's a great place to be. Very, very great place to be. So with all the things that you've learned right now, what would you say is your greatest fear currently?
Greatest fear. It's really interesting because, there's this notion of good and evil, and for me, I think for me personally, I think a better definition is love and fear, and I've really learned to sort of process fear in a very different way, because fear is, it's so debilitating, and a lot of people reside in it and don't realize it. And fear is just a perception. And, we watched Dune last year, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's an amazing book. Frank Herbert was so ahead of his time in the 60s writing that book. But one of the classic lines in there is, fear is the mind killer, and that's absolutely right. If we can let go of our fears. For me, some sort of harm coming to my children is a fear, but I don't reside in that. I don't want to, we're very powerful beings, and we have an incredible ability to create. And so if we reside, in something enough, sometimes we'll actually create it, and again, it's like, I've really learned to just let go of fear. I used to have, a fear of dying, and now I just feel this like very peaceful state. And I think what led me there is when I wrap my head around this concept of what is happiness, right? What is joy? And really, there's two types of joy. One is pleasure, and one is happiness. Pleasure is a much higher, faster burn. It's a more intense experience. Pleasure is usually a very self-centered sort of endeavor, but it's not lasting. So people who ultimately just constantly seek pleasure, which is self-insulating because you've got to do it twice as much the next time to like get the same high out of it. But people who are constantly seeking pleasure in that selfish sort of endeavor are ultimately doomed because it can never be satisfied. But then on the other hand, you have joy, and joy is something that the highs aren't as high, but it's much more steady and stable. And joy comes from giving of yourself to something or someone. And if we can pursue that sort of spirit of giving, and letting go of fear and just sort of that openness, and just sort of being open to what the universe has in store for us and how the universe is going to guide us, the more open and the more we can, let go of fear, the more I think peaceful and happy our lives will be. So that's, I've been really fortunate to kind of wrap my head around that a little bit more in the last 10 years. And it's been a game changer for me. It really has.
Oh man, I love that. I love that you shared all that stuff because that, we're always in the quest for meaning, right? Like if we're constantly like trying to, one of the things I tell people is like, what's worse than having none of your dreams come true is to have all of them come true only to realize you're not fulfilled. That's a terrible feeling.
That'd be horrible.
It'd be a very horrible feeling.
Yeah.
And the
journey, chasing it in the journey. That's where the
joy is.
That's the experience,
and to be able to like along the way, lift each other up and carry each other through these things, like that's one of the reasons why I love that sense of community and that sense of belonging when I come over to your house. Like it's amazing. I love, I was thinking about this the other day. I actually love being alone. Like I love because I love to meditate and I love the silence of aloneness. It doesn't freak me out. I know sometimes people feel lonely. I'm like, I don't really feel lonely. I feel pretty great.
It's an important element.
It's an important element.
Mm-hmm.
But I also love this feeling of like being able to share sacred experiences and joys with my friends and family. And that's one of the reasons why I love making movies, because when you're making movies, you're sharing all kinds of experiences with each other.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's why I think it's so awesome. I actually just have one last question for you, which is, knowing that you know now, everything that you know now, if you were to go back in time to the filmmaker that was just barely finishing Pure Race, or what was it called? Is it Pure Race, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
If you were to go back to that filmmaker, that Rocco, and give him a piece of advice, what would you give him?
Ooh, that is a good question. You know, I was in my early 20s and so idealistic and so just passionate and, you know, brave, you know,
Yeah.
because life hadn't kicked me in the butt yet.
Yeah.
Too hard. I mean, I'm very lucky. I had a very wonderful, peaceful childhood with a lot of support from loving parents and a very stable childhood. And, you know, I count myself very lucky. And my parents were always so encouraging. But I guess what I would say is no matter how bad it gets, you know, because life's going to, you know, kick you in the rear, you know, I mean, things are going to happen no matter how bad it gets, no matter what it takes, find a way to hold on to that childlike sense of wonderment. Because for me as an artist, you know, holding on to those fanboy moments of those films that I loved as a kid, or, you know, and here's an example. I started this tradition with some of my closest friends, and, you know, we get together every Christmas and we have this guys' Christmas tradition kind of party.
Yeah.
And we'll usually set it a couple weeks before Christmas. And basically what we do is we think of a toy or something we really wanted as a kid, but never got, you know, something that we just wanted so badly as a kid, but never got. And then everybody finds that item on eBay or wherever they can, buy it, wrap it, and it's a gift to ourselves, right? So we all sit in the living room after having dinner and we each open our present and we open it in front of the group. And oftentimes when that present comes out, the group's like, oh, wow, I remember that. You know, that was so, yes, you know, and then we tell the story behind it. And these stories are so interesting because it brings back so many memories of what it was like to be a child and look at the world through a child's eyes. And some of the stories are just laugh out loud funny. Some of these stories make you cry. Some of them are, I mean, they're never boring, right? So it's a very bonding kind of fun experience. So every year we do that, and this year, you know, we're doing it, and it is a really fun time, and just sharing stories of, you know, this happened during Christmas this year, and this thing happened, and the tree caught fire, and this crazy thing happened. Just, it's a very bonding, communal kind of thing that we do, and it's a really fun tradition. So, you know, again, find ways to hang on to that childlike sense of wonderment, especially if you're an artist.
Yeah,
you know.
No, I love it. I love it so much. Rocco, this has been so fun. This is like so fun talking to a fellow filmmaker, because I feel like the reasons why you make movies are a lot of the reasons why I like to make movies. And so it's just been really fun to like talk about these amazing memories that you've shared and you've had, and so excited for Gladiators of Steel and for what you're doing. But yeah, man, thank you so much for joining me. This has been so fun.
Thank you. And if anyone wants to watch the trailer or see anything about Gladiators of Steel, go to wheelhousetv.com.
Wheelhousetv.com.
Yeah, okay. And you can check out the trailer and see if it's something you're interested in. But I promise you, it doesn't disappoint.
Yeah, it is an adrenaline-filled adventure. So
thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, man.
Thank you.
Yep. Thanks so much for listening to the Lemonade Stand podcast, and we hope you enjoyed this episode. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast on whatever platform you use to be alerted when we release new episodes. We'd also love to hear your feedback in the reviews, and if you or someone you know has an awesome Lemonade Stand story, please reach out to us on social media and let us know. Thanks so much, and have a great day.